All right, welcome to the Dales Report. This morning we have the CEO of PharmaDrug, trades on the CSC under the ticker symbol BUZZ. ZZ, if you're Canadian, Daniel Cohen joins us. Daniel, great to have you back. How are things?
Things are really good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, how you enjoying this nice spring weather here in Canada? But this industry, obviously, at the tie going public last week, got a little bit of resurgence back into it. But I assume that things are progressing well on your front as well.
Things are moving on many cylinders right now.
Yep.
We're going to have a lot of developments over the next 2-3 months. A lot.
That's great. Well, last month we got some great feedback with the interview that you and I did. We talked a lot, but we didn't actually get a chance to talk about Cepharanthine, which is what I wanted to start with here today. So in a release earlier this week, you announced that you have advanced product and clinical development of Cepharanthine to treat infectious disease, including COVID-19. So on paper, this sounds very interesting. So walk me through what this announcement means and what can shareholders or investors expect as far as the advancements moving forward?
Well, Cepharanthine's been in use in Japan for over 70 years.
Yeah.
And we know that it has many different properties, anti-cancer and antiviral. The problem with Cepharanthine was that it had a very low bioavailability. And so our Cepharanthine has a reformulation, it's patented, and it has a way higher bioavailability, like 10 times higher. And so we're starting to see that there are many different things that we can use it for. We knew that there was a potential with Cepharanthine in COVID. There's been a lot of literature put out there from other researchers, but we were just doing our background work just to make sure this was a path we wanted to go down. And so recently there was a paper put out that had looked at almost 3,000 drugs that have already been approved around the world, and which ones that have been approved for something else had the potential for COVID, and Cepharanthine came out at the top. But its criticism was that because it had low bioavailability, you would have to be in the hospital on an IV all day for it to be effective, which is not what it's meant for. And that's when we realized that we should be using our formulation to use for mild to mid to mild COVID, but it's not necessarily just for COVID. It could be for SARS, it could be for MERS, it could be for any one of these types of viruses, potentially. And so we've actually done a lot of work. We've started putting the pre-IND package together. We're about halfway through it. And next month, at some point in July, we will be submitting it to the FDA for a pre-IND meeting. And that basically means that you sit down with the FDA, you've given them all the information, you ask them some questions, and basically you come out of it with a FDA's telling you what they want a clinical trial to look like, the beginning of an architecture of a clinical trial. So it's the first step towards moving towards a clinical trial for COVID and Cepharanthine. And so, like I said, we've started putting the package together. We're halfway through it. It's a lot of work, and we'll be submitting it at some point in July. So the next piece of news concerning Cepharanthine and COVID will be that we have indeed put the application in, and we're waiting for a meeting, and then we'll find out when the meeting is, and it's usually pretty quick after you file, especially with something like COVID. So, this summer we'll see us putting in the filing, getting a meeting date, and hopefully getting a meeting quickly.
How important and receptive, I guess, when working with the FDA and putting these trials together, is it a priority for them right now pertaining to, COVID-19? Like, as the vaccines continue to roll out more and more, you're seeing still a huge outbreak in India, but can you maybe walk us through as to like how important it is and how much is it advancing quicker with some of these opportunities such as Cepharanthine?
Right. So, that was one of the reasons why we held off for a bit. We started thinking, maybe because there's a vaccine that, the market's not going to really be looking for an antiviral pill. But the reality is that we're realizing that, not everybody's getting vaccinated, not on time. And you still need a drug to take care of people that haven't been vaccinated. Number one. Number two, are there going to be more variants? And will the vaccines be working for the variants? Thankfully, so far, the vaccines are effective on the variants, but we don't know that every variant, if they come out, will be. But also, who says this is the last pandemic that we're going to see related to COVID or SARS, right? So we do know that the US government is allocating a considerable amount of funds to be able to develop an oral antiviral pill. They've already pre-bought some pending on approval. they're committing another $3.2 billion towards the development of an antiviral pill. So we know that there's going to be money put to the sector, and there's a desire to have that type of pill produced and approved by the FDA.
Interesting. Well, in addition to this announcement, you recently announced orphan drug designation on esophageal cancer and also brought on a world-leading advisor, which was announced earlier this year. So quick update, where are we with this? And can you shed some light on the preclinical strategy you have planned for it? And what's the best strategy, I guess, moving forward?
So, we have a very interesting situation. There's a lot of research done on cepharanthine in cancer, and we definitely felt that esophageal cancer was probably the best one to go after for the company. And we brought on some advisors. What became quite interesting quite quickly was that there's been some good research done, but I think we need to really streamline what our strategy is for cepharanthine, because it shows some real potential in two completely different ways.
Okay.
Firstly, it does show potential as an anti-cancer agent, i.e. a pill that could kill or stop the spread of cancer cells. So that could be quite significant, obviously, for the treatment of esophageal cancer or any other cancer that, cepharanthine can be applied to. But what started becoming very interesting very quickly was, and this was with our work with our advisors, was that cepharanthine also shows a tremendous potential to potentially being able to reduce chemo resistancy. So chemo, with all its plus and minuses, one of the things that holds it back often from being able to be effective is that after a while, the cancer cells start to get smart on the chemo and start to resist the chemo. And there's a potential here that cepharanthine can actually reverse the resistancy of chemo, thereby making chemo that much more effective. And so when we showed that data to some of our advisors, they said, well, that could be also game changing. So why don't we do some more preclinical work that is done by the company and focus specifically on, do we want to use it as a strict monotherapy anti-cancer agent, or do we want to use it as a way to improve the efficacy of the chemo?
Right.
And, so understanding that before we start a clinical trial is of the utmost importance. We also felt that since we were going to do that work, we might as well look at every other cancer around, or every other cancer that we believe may have a potential. So the first stage of our preclinical trial, which we're about a quarter of the way through or half the way through, is to look at 60 different cancers in a dish and see which one cepharanthine has actual significance in terms of being able to combat. And so we've got results from about 25% of those cell lines, which actually isn't esophageal cancer, and we're already seeing some cancers that we hadn't even considered that could be helped potentially.
What are some of the cancers? What are some of the cancers?
I'm going to wait to get, we've done 60 cell lines, and I'm going to wait for all of that data to come out and to get the final report with all of the data to be able to digest it. And so we'll be able to come to the market in the middle or to the end of July and basically update everyone on the first phase of that preclinical trial.
But it looks promising.
Yeah, it looks very promising already. The second phase will be taking specific cancers and teaming them up with chemo and seeing if there's a change in the effectiveness of the chemo. So that's what I was talking about. First one will be, what are the cancers that cepharanthine by itself can be successful with potentially versus chemo? And then the second one will be in conjunction with chemo. And then at that point, we'll understand what our real strategy is for esophageal cancer and potentially another cancer.
Okay, good to know.
And so all that news will be coming out in the next few months. The first one will be the 60 cell lines, and then we'll work immediately towards the one to be working with chemo.
Lots going on, to say the least. Let's focus on DMT now. We've seen a lot more interest recently in DMT molecule due to its action of similar receptor pathways as psilocybin, but with faster acting abilities. So can you update us on your DMT strategy, your collaboration, obviously, with the University of Michigan, and the orphan drug status you achieved with the FDA for ischemic organ transplants?
Yeah, so
maybe explain, I know it sounds wordy, but what that all means as well.
Yeah, so we have two different routes, and they're kind of, the first one kind of stimulates the second strategy, but the first strategy was how do we create a center of intelligence for DMT
Right.
at PharmaDrug? You know, and there are some larger companies out there which have more resources that have been able to, you know, develop some of their, you know, IP or their intelligence by themselves. And we figured, well, what's the best way for us to be able to get to a critical mass of intelligence? And we believe that we should start to collaborate with some of the top academic researchers in DMT, people who have a history in DMT, people who have already produced work on DMT, and people that are respected in DMT. And with that, we collaborate with them. We have access to potential IP, but we also create a think tank because they become part of our working group, and we can discuss things with them on a weekly, monthly basis and develop ideas together. And that's why we brought Stephen Barker on as an advisor, and that's why we're collaborating or funding the University of Michigan's next stage of project for DMT. We also have something else that should be announced sometime in the next few weeks, which is a collaboration with yet another university. You know, the University of Michigan is preclinical. That means, you know, animal testing, but we're looking to do something which is foundational research with a top-ranking university, specifically in the psychedelic space, and to be able to develop more foundational research.
Which would focus primarily on what then?
Understanding how DMT works in the human body, what receptors, how it responds to receptors, things along those lines. By understanding all of that, we can develop our own internal intelligence by being part of a think tank, which is some of the top academic thinkers in psychedelics and who are continuing to move that forward. We build an internal intelligence, and that's already starting to go somewhere. So you saw that we got orphan drug designation, ODD, from the FDA for organ transplants, and that's something we're working on. But that's something that's quite key there, because, I want to point this out, that a lot of the work in psychedelics is specific, not all of it, but a lot of it is specifically focused on neuropsychiatric type of indications or illnesses or conditions. We started seeing that DMT, which is naturally produced in the brain, actually has a function in the body. And perhaps DMT could be used for other things besides neuropsychiatric conditions. And that's where we did some research, and we realized that there is some literature out there, some research has been done that potentially could be used for kidney transplants. Well, what makes it potentially positive for a kidney transplant? It's obviously got nothing to do with psychiatric conditions. So there's an ability potentially for DMT to reduce inflammation at the right point in time. Well, if that's the case, then what else could we potentially use it for? So we're in the midst of developing our own commercial strategy right now. We should have some news in the next few weeks. It'll be about a specific indication, which is an unmet need as far as we're concerned, and potentially a development of a delivery mechanism, which will make the the application of DMT much more effective. So we're working on that right now. We should have some news in the next few weeks, but it's really going to be about developing our own internal commercial strategy for DMT. So there's a lot going on there.
Wow.
Lots of news that will be coming out in the next 2-3 months, starting probably in 2-3 weeks.
DMT has really taken a big step forward. A lot of money that's been raised with regards to research pertaining to that. But from a neurological standpoint, as I've said, I've learned a lot where it's not nearly as long lasting as psilocybin. But to your point, even finding some new things, such as like related to inflammation through kidneys, it's truly fascinating, obviously, to say the least, as we learn more and more about this psychedelic space, to say the least. Let's focus now on Supersmart in the Netherlands, where it has pivoted, obviously, since the launch from last year. PharmaDrug, your company, announced recently that Supersmart's division launched a Slim Winkle brand online retail platform in the Netherlands and Europe. The platform will sell psilocybin truffles in the Netherlands and non-psilocybin products in other European markets. So what kind of leadership position do you think you can establish as the awareness of the functional mushroom market keeps exploding? And what can we expect over the next, say, 3 to 6 months?
Well, obviously, functional mushrooms have been around for a while. And so, in a certain way, there are already some leaders. And we also launched the website in the US, and the US will be obviously focusing solely on functional mushrooms. However, we do believe we're at that point in time where the market is going to expand considerably, and it's going to be shifting out of the counterculture into the mainstream. And
Right.
usually when you see products go from the counterculture into the mainstream, you have an evolution of the product. And then we think we can add value by adding intelligence to the product and adding some scientific background to the product. And so that's the way in which we think we can add value and start to really differentiate ourselves on the functional mushroom side. Paul, who is our chief scientific officer, has obviously joined PharmaDrug in total, and he's helping us develop that. So what you're going to see is over the next 6 months, because you launch a website, an economic platform, the volume is not there at first, right? You got to build the volume, right? So we are it's going to start in early July, a very explicit, focused branding campaign to really create that Slim Winkle brand in terms of perception in the public and to start to create traffic. And also what you'll see over the next few months is the addition of Slim Winkle branded products on the functional mushroom side, on the psilocybin side in the Netherlands. So what we want to do is bring the product forward, add some more credibility to the product, and be able to brand ourselves around that.
When you say
and we think that there's room for that in the US, definitely. And we think there's definitely room for that on the functional mushroom side in the Netherlands, especially if you're able to marry that with psilocybin truffles. But also, let's not forget that, part of the reason why we want to do this is that we want to develop a brand, a respect, a confidence, and a distribution network, as well as a supply chain, so that when eventually, which we believe it's an eventual, not an if, it's a when, adult use psychedelics become legal in different parts of the US or in different jurisdictions, we already have that brand, that trust, and that distribution model.
Do you see that happening
that's part
soon?
of what we're doing there, right?
Do you see that happening soon in certain districts within the US?
I'm not so sure how soon. We definitely see California starting to move towards it. That still could take several years. So,
but even if a place like California,
we want to be able to build a business that doesn't have to have that happen to be successful, but is prepared for it when it does happen.
So you just launched in the US, early signs, like what kind of demand are you looking at right now? Is there much, or has there been a lot of positive feedback?
There's been very minimal. Like the reality is that we have to build our brand, and although it's launched, I will say, the volumes at first are going to be very minimal, right? Because you have to build the volume. We brought on a director of e-commerce, and she's quite skilled, and we're finalizing our whole tactical strategy, a 3 to 6 month tactical strategy that is going to be launched early July. So, really, we're going to see July, August, September. That's when the momentum is going to start to build. So it's going to be a 3 to 6 months development for the US, for the Netherlands / Europe. And that's also going to include us introducing our own branded products. That'll probably take a few months before they hit the shelf or the e-shelf. But we're already at work on finalizing formulations that we want to use for our own products.
Good to know. Last thing I wanted to ask, you recently entered into another supply agreement in the Eurozone, this time with a cannabis extractor for medical grade THC oil to be sold under PharmaDrug's own brand. So let's focus now on Germany. How is the process developing towards launching your own product? And with the increase of global demand in THC oil, is now the time to introduce it to the German market?
I think it's the perfect time to introduce it to
the
German market. So first of all, this is a landmark deal for us because when you're just reselling other people's product, you're at the mercy of how much product they can get to you, and you're relying on their brand. So we've been selling Bedrocan for a few years now. We could sell a lot more Bedrocan. We could do a lot more business. We have the demand, but we only have access to a certain amount of supply. We signed a deal with another global Canadian-based LP, and their product has been doing okay, not fantastic. The secret or the key to our success will be to have our own product with our own brand, where we can control how much supply we get, how we get it, and how we deliver it. And that's what is game changing for us in terms of that contract with the Danish manufacturer. They just received their GMP a few weeks ago, so they're good to go. They got it from Denmark, from the government of Denmark, or the regulator in Denmark. We are finalizing our own supply chain inspections, which we need to do to fulfill our GMP requirements. But we're on track to be able to launch this product in September. We think it's the perfect time to introduce oils because oils are starting to make their move. We saw it in North America, whether it was Canada or whether it was different states in the US. It starts with flour and then it starts to move towards oil. Doesn't mean the flour disappears, but the oil starts taking a dominant share of the market pie, especially when you're seeing the pie continue to expand.
Right.
So we've seen that 2020 versus 2019 in oils, still a small fraction of flour, but took a major step forward in 2020, and that's continuing to happen in 2021. So we think that's where we can really make a difference. We believe our product's going to be just as good as anyone else's product, and we'll be.
Why do you believe that, if you don't mind me asking?
Oh, because we've already done the technical specs on our product, and we've looked at what the other products are in the field. So we really do believe that our product's going to be just as good as anyone else's product, and we believe we're going to be able to offer it at competitive prices. And still maintain a better margin than what we probably get right now on the Bedrocan. So this is going to be monumental for PharmaDrug and finally get us to a point where we can take the business to a proper level.
Well said. Listen, you're a busy guy. Appreciate the time for checking in. Thanks for the update. Keep in touch, and we'll obviously connect next month for obviously it appears a lot of news that's going to be developing over the next couple of weeks. But keep in touch.
Maybe at some point we'll introduce you to Paul as well, our Chief Scientific Officer.
Let's do it. Let's get him on. Thanks, Daniel.
Take care.